Picture a car so fast, so absurd, so nakedly built for one single purpose that the people who made the rules decided the only way to stop it was to change the rules entirely. Not to fine it, not to restrict it, to ban it. That is what happened to the Plymouth Superbird. And the strangest part, by the time they banned it, the car was already dead. The factories had stopped, the engineers had moved on. The racing season that the Superbird was built to win was already over. The ban was almost beside the point, except that it guaranteed this car would live forever in the minds of anyone who ever saw one do what it was built to do. This is that story. It starts, like so many car stories do, with a rivalry that got completely out of hand. 1968. NASCAR. Chrysler is getting embarrassed. Not quietly embarrassed, loudly, publicly, lap by lap embarrassed. Ford has the Torino Talladega, a car designed specifically to cheat the air at speed, with a flush nose, a longer snout, and a roofline that had been reworked in a wind tunnel. Ford had done the math. Aerodynamics at 200 miles per hour is not a suggestion. It is survival. Chrysler was losing races it should have won. Their cars had the engines, they had the drivers, but above 170 miles per hour, the B-body Mopars got squirrely. The air wanted to get under them. The nose lifted. Drivers were fighting the car at the exact moment they needed to trust it. So Chrysler went to their engineers and said, "Fix it. Whatever it takes, fix it." Richard Petty said no first. Petty, the man who would eventually become the most decorated driver in NASCAR history, the King, was driving for Plymouth at the time. And when Plymouth handed him the 1969 Dodge Charger 500 and told him this was their answer to Ford, he looked at it, drove it, and decided it was not good enough. He left. He signed with Ford. That was a humiliation. Richard Petty in a Ford Torino was a photograph that Chrysler could not afford to print. He won the 1969 Daytona 500 in that Torino. He won 5 other races that season. The engineers got a new deadline. The car that came out of those conversations was not an evolution. It was an argument. A physical, rolling argument that said, "Fine, you want aerodynamics? Here are aerodynamics." The Plymouth Superbird arrived in 1970. It had a nose cone bolted to the front that added 18 inches to the car's total length. Not a reshaped body, an add-on, a separate piece of fiberglass designed to split the air before it had a chance to get under the car. It looked wrong. It looked like someone had attached a beak. Then there was the wing. The rear wing sat on 2 metal stanchions, elevated nearly 2 feet above the trunk lid. Engineers had tested lower wing placements. Lower wings were faster in a straight line, but the car needed downforce over the rear wheels on the exit of corners, and the only way to get that airflow clean was to get the wing above the turbulent air coming off the roofline. So they made it tall. They made it look completely insane, and they did not care, because at Talladega, nobody was looking at the wing. They were watching the gap close. The car was also fitted with a covered headlight housing, flush, smooth, a single molded piece that eliminated the aerodynamic drag of exposed headlights. To drive it on the street, you flipped the housings open manually. They were not automatic. If you forgot to flip them, you were driving at night with no lights. Several owners did exactly that. Under the hood, the standard engine was a 440 cubic inch V8. Known internally as the six-pack, it came with 3 two-barrel carburetors and produced 390 horsepower. That was the standard option. The optional engine, available to any buyer who ticked the box, was the 426 HEMI. 425 horsepower on paper. In reality, everyone in the paddock knew that number was conservative. How conservative is still debated. At Talladega in 1970, Pete Hamilton qualified the Superbird at over 188 miles per hour and went on to win the race. Nobody had ever won at Talladega from that qualifying position before. Buddy Baker pushed a Superbird to 200.096 miles per hour during testing. That was the first time a NASCAR-legal car had officially broken 200 miles per hour on a closed course. 200 miles per hour on a car that was available at your local Plymouth dealer. Here is the problem. NASCAR had a rule that nobody had thought very hard about until the Superbird made it matter. The rule said that for a car to race in NASCAR's Premier Series, the manufacturer had to build at least one road car for every 2 dealerships in the country. Plymouth had roughly 2,000 dealers. That meant they had to build at least 1,000 Superbirds for public sale. They built 1,920. That sounds like a reasonable number until you think about what they were selling. This was not a sleek sports car. This was a car with a nose cone the length of a dining table and a wing that made it too tall for most residential garages. The service manual for the wing alone ran to multiple pages. Mechanics at dealerships had no idea how to work on the nose cone. Several dealers reportedly sold them at a discount just to move them off the lot. One dealer in Georgia, according to accounts that have circulated in Superbird circles for decades, cut the wings off his remaining stock before selling them. He said customers were asking him to do it. He said the wing made the car undesirable. That dealer was wrong. Profoundly, historically wrong. NASCAR banned the Superbird before the 1971 season began. The rule change was specific. Any car with an aerodynamic device, a wing, a nose cone, a spoiler beyond a certain height, would need to run a smaller engine. Suddenly, the 426 HEMI was too big. Suddenly, the Superbird, as built, could not race. Chrysler looked at the math, looked at what it would cost to redesign the car to the new rules, and decided it was not worth it. They pulled out of factory racing entirely. Richard Petty came back to Plymouth, which is its own kind of poetry. Now here is what I want you to sit with for a moment. The Superbird raced for exactly 1 season. 1. It ran in 38 NASCAR events in 1970 and won 21 of them, more than half. That winning percentage is not a record that has been matched in a single season by any car with that kind of production requirement before or since. And then it was gone. The street versions sat on lots. They aged in driveways. They got repainted. They got modified. Some of them, yes, had their wings removed. By the early 1970s, you could buy a used Superbird for less than the original sticker price. The car that had broken the 200-mile-per-hour barrier, that had embarrassed Ford at their own game, that had brought Richard Petty back to Plymouth, you could find one for $3,000. People did not know what they had. 1971 was a quiet year at Plymouth. They had won. They had proven the point. And then the rules had changed, and the proof did not matter anymore. The engineers went back to working on cars that could fit in garages. But the Superbirds did not disappear. They changed hands, slowly, quietly, the way things do when the world is not paying attention yet. Some went into barns, some went into collections. A few got raced in local events where nobody cared about wing height. One, almost certainly more than one, got buried under 30 years of accumulated junk in someone's shed, waiting. The moment collectors started paying attention, the prices did not climb. They detonated. A numbers-matching 426 HEMI Superbird in original condition sold at Barrett-Jackson for $302,500 in the early 2000s. That same configuration today, over $1 million. There are verified examples that have sold for significantly more, depending on provenance, color, and documentation. The vitamin C orange ones, the Tor red ones, the ones with the original build sheets still tucked under the carpet. Those are the ones that make auction rooms go quiet. So why did America ban the Plymouth Superbird? Officially, aerodynamic advantage. The wings and nose cones were making the racing uncompetitive. One manufacturer was dominating so completely that the spectacle was at risk. Actually, it was more complicated than that. NASCAR in 1970 was trying to balance itself between its Southern heritage and a national television audience. The cars that were winning were not the cars that looked like what people drove to the track. The Superbird looked like science fiction. It looked like something from a future that the grandstands had not asked for. And there was something else. Something that nobody in the official record quite says directly, but that comes through in the meetings and the correspondence of the era. The wing car era was genuinely dangerous. Not because the cars were more likely to crash, they were actually more stable than what had come before. But when they did crash, when a 427 HEMI at 190 miles per hour left the ground, the results were catastrophic in a way that smaller, slower crashes were not. The sport was not ready to have that conversation publicly. Banning the cars was easier than having it. Bobby Isaac drove a Dodge Daytona, the Superbird's sister car built by Dodge the year before, and won the 1970 NASCAR Cup Championship before the ban came down. He was asked once what it felt like to drive one at full speed at Talladega. He thought about it. Then he said something along the lines of, "It does not feel fast. It feels like the car has decided where it is going, and you are just along for the conversation." That is not a comfortable feeling at 190 miles per hour. But it is apparently a very fast one. Today, the Plymouth Superbird sits in a strange place in American automotive history. It is recognized. It is celebrated. Richard Petty's racing number 43 makes certain examples worth considerably more than mechanically identical cars. The wing that dealers were cutting off to move inventory, the wing that made residential garage doors irrelevant, is now the thing. The thing that makes it a Superbird, and not just a roadrunner with a nose job. There are museums with them. There are concours events where they sit under lights, polished, correct, with judges examining the gaps between the wing stanchions. The wing height is now a point of authenticity, measured in fractions of an inch. Somewhere out there, there is almost certainly a Superbird that has not been found yet. In a barn, behind a tractor, under a tarp that has not been touched since 1974, with the original paint, with the build sheet, with the HEMI intact, and the nose cone slightly cracked from a parking lot bump that the owner never got around to fixing. The question is not whether that car exists. The question is whether you would recognize it if you walked past it. If this is the kind of story you want more of, real history, real machines, no filler, hit subscribe. We do one of these every week. And if you want to drop something in the comments, here is the question I actually want answered. What was the most consequential rule change in motorsport history? Not the most famous, the most consequential, the one that changed everything after it. Tell me what you think.